Oh.
This was suggested by Bob during a conversation. I'm not sure when it was, or I think it was on the phone.
I think so.
Yeah. And we were talking about the conference and what have you. So what we started, and I think it was because we're part of Eric's scanning thing and we're looking at so many books and manuals and all that stuff. And I had comment about something related to that. So essentially we're going to talk about some of the activities and functions of the club. The HP65 Club was started in June 1974, and it came about because I bought an HP65, and I was just so entranced with the programming of the 65 that I thought that it would be pretty good to be able to gather inputs from other people, and so I started a newsletter called 65 Notes. And of course, as time went on, HP brought out another model, and it was a 67, and it was very clear that having a model number in your name is kind of a limitation, so the club name was changed to PPC. And the PPC had no meaning, although there's probably 50 meanings for personal programmers, personal photographers of California, and so on. And the club went on, and we did a very famous project called the PPC ROM. And the ROM project required dealing directly with HP as a customer, and our local HP salesman, who was his name slips me now. Roger, do you remember the name of the salesman? Anyway, you didn't know him, but because it's in the ROM manual. And he said, well, you know, you should incorporate, because we're going to be talking about tens of thousands of dollars of sales, and HP doesn't want to deal with some guy in his garage, you know, they should, you know. So they really encourage us to incorporate, and so incorporation means that you have a board of directors, you know, you register and follow all the laws of California corporations. And when I selected the directors, I selected local guys who were very active and were willing to commit to 2 years of being a director of PPC. And
remember you said you wanted the group to be self-supporting and not dependent
well,
on
yeah,
one person.
of course, yeah.
I didn't know that
We wanted
HP
the
was
group
involved.
to prosper and grow and so forth.
I didn't know that HP wanted to.
So when you have a board of directors, you have to have a chairman of the board. And I knew this older guy, and he was, you know, technically knowledgeable.
He was
Don't
on
get me
the
started.
Olympic organizing committee, remember that?
Yeah.
No, but let's not go into him right now, okay? But so I selected a guy called Emmett Ingram.
Yeah.
Now Emmett was a retired AT&T middle-level manager, so you get an idea of what his perspective of the world is. And as time went on, Emmett decided that he needed to take over PPC, in which he was able to do that. Now I won't go into all the repercussions in that, but it really was a very educational experience in terms of who your friends are, okay? Anyway, Emmett took over PPC, and of course PPC had a reputation with HP, but everything that required an interface with HP, Emmett was very strong-willed, and he had very fixed ideas, and as time went on, it was very clear that HP didn't want to work with him. And we, okay, I don't, I think there were two incidents in which made HP, or was forced HP into making a decision that when I was out at PPC, I formed CHU. And of course, I went to HP and says, well, you know, there's another user group, CHU and PPC, and let them know and so on. But anything that involved HP in the user community, they, in their perspective, would have to deal with both groups and equally and do for one and do for the other, etc. And we had the thing called the card in the box, and it was on your slide, right? The discover. This one of the big problems we felt that was that we were not growing fast enough because we don't have exposure. And if we get HP to give us exposure, that would be our salvation. So the card in the box was the deal that every 41 and 71 calculator that HP made, they would have a promotional card for PPC. So I finally convinced, through a lot of work and communication, that HP will do this. And the conditions were that, well, you must print this card in the box to HP printing standards. That's how I got to know some of the printing aspects. It will be printed in Corvallis, and we'll tell you how many to print. And of course, you can design it as you like, but you submit it to us for approval. And of course, I think they may have had a legal look at it, what have you. So we ended up with an agreed upon text. They printed the cards, and they started putting them in calculators in Singapore, I guess was at the time. Okay? And that was great. I can't say that every new 41 you opened up and you found a PPC card in the box that really caused a spike of membership. I don't think it really did. But anyway, it came to a point where HP needed a new batch. And of course I said, well, you know, you've got two user groups, so the card in the box should mention both. And Emma said, over my dead body. I think that was incident number one that, whoa, HP was, you know, yeah, Brian.
During what time frame did the card in the box, these things happen? And number two, who was the person or the persons at HP you were dealing with regarding the card in the box?
I don't remember all their names. At the time, Janet Cryer was the club communicator for HP. In terms of the card in the box and the dates and all that, because the card in the box had an official HP part number on it. I mean, this is real stuff.
Right.
I think I included a write-up of the card in the box in one of the previous conferences. Yeah. And the whole history and photographs, the whole history is there, and it's only about 2 pages, I think, not very long.
I think I'm sure you remember that 1984 was the year that all of the breakup of
It was in that time
Right.
area, yeah.
occurred. I don't know about the card. I thought
The second
earlier.
incident, I think that really pointed out an attitude change of HP toward PPC and CHU. HP had loaned PPC the user's library. And so we discussed it, and they gave me how many programs they sold, and so you could estimate how much money might be brought in and so forth. Turned out that was so totally bogus. But so what I did is I got on a plane, I flew up to Corvallis, I rented a truck, backed it up to HP, and loaded in 4 big steel Lazy Susans and shelves, and they have the folders of all the programs on there, okay? And you get the master and you'd photocopy it and send it to the customer. I hurt, my back hurts, I think in part due to unloading that. I did it all by myself. In fact, I drove 1,000 miles from Corvallis home in one stretch. So HP calls up Emmett and says, we want the user's library back. And I think those two things clarify. Anyway, we competed for about a year, and Chew ran for maybe about a year later, and then first PPC died, and then Chew, of course, got published and died too. Part of PPC and Chew was an annual conference like we're holding now, starting in 1979. So one of the things that PPC did, well, first of all, the first issue, which was one sheet of paper for 2 sides, was in June 1974. And then we did issue number 2, which was, I don't know, Jake might remember better, was it 2 pages or something? It wasn't, you know.
I think it was 2 sheets.
Huh?
I think it was 2 sheets of paper.
2 sheets, so 4 pages. And HP, when they announced the 67, they promised a newsletter as part of that. And indeed, supposedly in the budget of the whole program, money was set aside to produce that, and Henry Horn was the editor. But you know, it was June, and then here we're coming up into September, and HP hadn't had their newsletter yet. So I had 2 issues out, and we thought HP was coming in September. So I really put a 3rd issue. I wanted to beat HP by having 3 issues ahead of them, and I was successful. So a race began for Users Newsletter number 3, and we won that race. Henry Horn was HP's editor, and we immediately became true friends, and we collaborated a lot. We users outlasted HP in our publishing, and the story of Henry Horn, which is Joe Horn's uncle, is a rather sad one in terms of why he left HP. When he left HP, their newsletter Keynotes, HP Keynotes, died because it takes a unique and crazy person to do a newsletter. That's all I can tell you, you know. But Henry was very good at it, and Henry was a very good writer. In fact, it was often said that Henry Horn wrote letters, and anybody who received a Henry Horn letter never threw it away. And that's true. I have a file of Henry Horn letters in my thing. So we outlasted the HP Keynotes, and part of our activity was this conference I'm going through today. So we are the longest and oldest HP user group, period. Okay, one of the reasons I think that we were accepted was because we set up a firm set of values of who we are, what we're doing, and how and why we do it. And these values are very well expressed and laid out in print, available to everybody. And they are in the Recall 20 book, which is a book published by Vladik, and I forgot the other guy's name now. Frank Wales. And now they're proposing to do a Recall 40 book, and that was Recall 20 years of the London group, which was a PPC chapter originally. And part of the situation was that we, the users, always wanted more information than what HP was willing to give. What's coming next, and you know, why did you do this, and all of those kinds of things. And part of the club operation, we had what's called an HP phone bulletin. And that came about because one of the members was reading about what's going on, and he had a small business, and he bought an answering machine and put it in his business. Now remember, this is many decades ago, and his customers didn't like talking to answering machines, and so he thought that the answering machine was not productive for him, and he donated it to PPC, and I used it for what I called a phone bulletin. And one of the incidents of the phone bulletin was the famous HP poem, and how many people don't know what the HP poem was? Joey, probably. 1, 2, 3. Brian?
I don't remember,
Okay.
maybe I do, but
All right.
Yeah, I've forgotten what it was.
But there wasn't Untitled.
One of the biggest interests was, what's HP doing next? What's coming next? And HP had, for new models, code names. In fact, there's one book, I forgot the guy in
Mark Stabs
yes, who has a book of code names.
from Netherlands.
And of course, and I encourage people who had any information, let me know, okay? I had a very fixed policy of how I handled that information. Like, for example, I'm trying to think of an example. Well, let's say somebody sent me something like an unannounced ROM for the 41. And of course, when you have the ROM and you can see the contents and so forth. And if I start talking about it, and it's an unannounced product, that HP wouldn't like that. So I say, hello HP, I just received blah, 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 blah. And I let them know I had it. I mean, that was the way we operated. We didn't want to make HP's life unprofitable, but we also had our requirements. And so we had this relationship which has proceeded all the way to the end. There was an incident that did involve me getting an HP ROM, and I think I've talked about this in the past. It was sent to me. I didn't have the equipment. I sent it to somebody else who copied it and then made EPROMs of it and sent the ROM back to me. And of course, I told HP I had it. And that was just when I was making a trip to HP. I would visit the factory and spend 3 days at the factory in Corvallis. And we had meetings all day long of all the various issues, the manual writing team and the design engineers and the whole ball of wax. And when I got up there in the meeting and the manager sat me down and we're talking about this ROM, and in all the discussions, finally HP said, well, Richard, did it ever occur to you to return HP's property? Of course, they had me, I mean, they really had me. And I said, you're right. I should return HP's property. But I cannot divulge to you who gave it to me. But I will arrange for somebody in Corvallis to walk into HP and deliver the ROM to you. And I did that. Well, after that discussion, a whole new relationship developed. And one of the things that came out of that informal meeting was that, all right, HP will give PPC permission to copy ROMs in EEPROM. I mean, it was, for us, it was that key, right? And there was a whole lot of other things. Another example is the NOMOS. How many people have seen NOMOS stamped on documents? Okay, half of you. Okay, NOMOS stands for Not Manufacturer Supported. And it was I made up the term, and I would take certain See, one of the problems with HP giving information is that when they do that, they incur a legal obligation to support it. It wasn't that they didn't want you to know it, didn't want you to have it, they didn't want any obligation. And so the idea of NOAS was that if you have this internal ROM listing, you know, in a document that came directly from the HP computer, that was very nice for us because we could, you know, study it and decode it and all the stuff that we do. And but HP doesn't want to have their technical support having to answer questions about it. So NOMAS came about, ROMs and EPROMs came about. The 41 has a private function. And the idea is that you make a magnetic card private, and so you're not going to be able to reproduce and copy the card. But of course, our technical expertise, we broke private immediately. I mean, it was like you know, here's the spare key for the lock. But while we published all the technical details that if you read it all through, you would understand how everything works, it was clear out to clear private. But we didn't say, oh, well, you want to clear private? Step 1, step 2, step 3. We didn't do that. And HP greatly respected that. Another contribution we made to the community was that since we were a very well-known group, and certain people who are very talented are publicly known, so HP would hire employees from our group. And some of you know, one of the most famous is Bill Wicks. And he went on to be, you know, manager, and of course, the stories I could tell you about Bill Wicks, but anyway.
Because he started all the RPL calculators.
Huh?
It was because of him that we got the RPL calculators.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember one time a story, it was a 28 initially, team was having a problem, and they were working, and they didn't know what to do, and so they came to their boss and said, you know, we really are deadlocked here. And so Bill says, give me everything. And they gave him all the documentation, what have you. And he left HP, went to a hotel for about 2 days, and he came back. He says, here's how you do it. Okay, originally we supported all models, TI, Casio, Sharp. And of course HP. But as we grew, I felt that it was not, I was not as enthusiastic for TI and Casio and Sharp that I was for HP. So we had individual columns of the other machines. So I agreed with, I can't remember the first guy's name, I just read it the other day, and we talked it over, so I officially announced that from now on, all the TI stuff will be done by this person. So the TI newsletter and the TI users group came from PTC.
Is that Richard Vandenberg?
Yes. And of course, the last one was Palmer, and of course he died shortly after attending one of our conferences.
In Nashville.
There was a person selected for Casio and for National, and National was never happened. And Casio, I think they had done 1 or 2 newsletters, and they died. Many foreign chapters became independent, and we mentioned the UK group, and there was quite a few others, especially in Australia. One US chapter went on to start the largest US computer club. And his name was, oh gosh, Dean Lattman.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and Dean Lattman was famous for a couple of things. One of them was that he made, early on with a 65, homemade magnetic cards.
Yeah, while beta testing.
What's that?
He was beta testing the machine for HP, and that's when he did that.
Well, anyway, in addition to cutting up regular magnetic cards and making cards for the 65, he was also making them colored. He worked out a nice way to make a nice even, so it looked like a red card or a green card. And he made quite a hit with HP, and maybe this was before he became more involved. He sent them to Bill Hillett, and Bill Hillett was very impressed. Dean Lampman had what was that city in
Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio, yeah. And he started the computer club that grew very big, okay? And now I went to Wikipedia to see what's the largest U.S. computer club, and it's an association of computer users. First of all, the clubs, saturated, and then I guess they got this association of computer users or something, which was bigger than this. The Chicago chapter, as we all know, continues today. Brian was telling us, they meet now and then. And
Once a month?
Yeah. That's about, the LA Orange County chapter still sort of exists, but we only meet once a year, right, Joseph?
That's right, yeah.
Roger goes to them, and Joseph, yeah. But I always thought that the Chicago group in the last few years was bigger than our group. But today, based on how many people you get to a meeting, we get 3 times that many, which is still only a dozen, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the largest computer club, the largest, do you know what the name of the largest U.S. computer club?
I don't remember the name. It's a very famous name. They had, very famous for their swap meets.
Oh.
I just can't remember the name.
And they're based in Dayton?
Are
they based in Dayton?
I'm trying to think.
No, never mind.
They may have started in Dayton and moved somewhere else, but
Yeah.
maybe it's the Dayton swap meet that's so famous. You can look it up on Wikipedia, I guess. Part of the whole activity is a unique relationship with Hewlett Packard. And unique is one of a kind. I mean, really, right.
I didn't hear you tell us about the poem. What was the poem all about?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was that our?
I got distracted. The HP, okay, since I encourage everybody to send every gossip, rumor, and everything to me, okay, and I would filter it and make it sure we don't insult HP, but we always had the leading, cutting-edge information. In fact, at one point, we had a encoding, decoding program for the 41, and I published a coded 2-sentence line in the binding of the newsletter that had the secret information, but it was encoded. And I went to, I worked for Staytech, and we went to New Jersey for a crystal conference. And while there, the local group south of New Jersey, I don't remember what it was, I was going to go there and have one of their meetings. I'm getting distracted, I know. And so one of the members who was a pilot flew up to Atlantic City where I was staying, and my wife and I got in his plane and flew down to his house. We had the meeting, and I asked the people at the meeting, does anybody follow the encoded message thing? And the host said, well, I do. I said, I asked him another question, and he looked at me, what decoding program? I said, yeah, Oh, yeah, I know the encoded message, but I don't use a decoding program. Oh, yeah, I go to work and we have systems that break codes, and I just read the message using the system at work. Well, so much for the power of that code.
Yeah.
Anyway, because of this information flow and the relationship with HP, one of the members who worked for an advertising agency had a big contract with HP for a promotion of a whole new line of machines. And he sent all that information to me. So, I mean, I had in writing all kinds of things. And in that information was the code names of future machines. So I wrote a poem that was sprinkled with all these code names. Will everything be nice when we have
Coconut and spice.
coconut and spice? Yeah.
Oh, will be I forlorn when we see Capricorn.
There you go.
The eagle has died. Forget it. What's it?
Okay, anyway, I put that on the phone book.
Pretty good.
Somebody at HP heard it, and all hell broke loose. The first thing they did was to call in Henry Horn. And Henry didn't even know the poem existed. It went all the way up to Bill Hill within an hour. And Bill Hill, was raving mad, and so they elected that Henry Horn should talk to me. Okay. And of course, I didn't tell Henry how I had gotten it. That wasn't necessarily the issue. And I said, Henry, I'll remove the phone book. So the phone book was only there like 4 or 5 hours. Didn't last very long. And that was part of the relationship we have with HP. Our purpose is not to steal from HP and publish all their secrets, no. And that's what made PPC unique. And so the HP poem is part of it.
Okay.
Mention all this, U.S. chapter, okay. As Brian observed, many college degree theses and authors of books would reference PPC. Book authors sometimes reference me personally, as you noticed in your scanning project. PPC Journal has a Wikipedia entry, you can look it up. PPC accomplishments is recognized by computer users, and this is one of the nicest articles I've ever read. It was from a very famous, well, today I guess we'd call him a blogger, I don't know. But the field is embedded computing. And he was lamenting the fact that here this calculator group did this PPC ROM project, and why aren't our computer people doing something similar? And I have the link to that at home. I probably should have put it in here. But it was a very nice and very long article. And after he published that, I responded because there were some questions that were answered, and I don't remember if he answered that response. But the whole thing is quite educational to read. Of course, synthetic programming is one of the things we started, and Bill Wicks played a very important role of that. A non-normalized number is a number in which the calculator operating system cannot deal with. It doesn't mean anything to it. But non-normalized numbers can cause a machine to do unpredictable things. Non-normalized numbers were first discovered and studied by taking a calculator. I don't remember the model, it may have been 65.
67.
Huh? 67? It could have been 67. In fact, when Adam was going over the shelf, I had a number of these boxes that we built to do that, and he was asking what they were for, and I said, well, this is a unique thing historically, and he did take those, so they may show up. Anyway, you take this calculator, you bounce it on a bed, and the loose batteries would interrupt the power, and then it would generate a non-normalized number. Very random, very unpredictable, definitely non-repeatable. And then we switched over to a box with a switch, so you don't bounce, you don't interrupt the power, you press the switch. And that was the beginning of non-normalized numbers, and we started publishing non-normalized numbers. And there was one particular non-normalized number that if you sent it to the printer
On the 97.
on the 97, it would turn the printer on, but it wouldn't turn the printer off. And so you'd run the thing and all of a sudden smoke is pouring out of the printer. Okay? Well, again, I went on the phone book and immediately spread the news, and I bet I saved a lot of printers. And we circulated non-normalized numbers on the magnetic cards. They created special displays, and let's see what I got here.
Some alpha
Yeah, okay. One of the reasons that we were so successful with the 41, maybe I'll take credit for two reasons. One, on one of my visits to the factory, they said, well, Richard, can we come to the conference room? And I went into this conference room, and there's a whole bunch of people sitting around, and they're all looking at me, and they sat me down, and they said, well, we want to show you a new machine, but first you have to sign this non-disclosure agreement. And that was my first non-disclosure agreement to sign with HP. And in fact, I've probably been under non-disclosure with HP ever since. And then they gave me a machine which, where's Gene?
He had to leave.
Oh,
Leave
okay.
early. He'll be-
Which Gene now has, okay? And it was a machine that I was holding up in the first article about the HP 41 that HP printed and HP solved. That was the machine. Gene wanted that machine. And the second reason is that in the 65, I can't remember David's last name, and I don't have any. My library is gone. I can't remember his last name. He lives in Northridge. And what David did was he took the HP 65 and the magnetic cards, and he would make a card of plus. He would read it and write it to a card. Then he would take a magnetic dust in alcohol, and he would dip the card in alcohol and let it dry. And on the card was the magnetic patterns that you could visually see. And he decoded every instruction on the 65, and he put them into a table. Now the 65 was it 6 bits?
6 bits, yes.
Yeah. Then along comes the 67. Well, the 67 was compatible with the 65, but it had an 8-bit word, and so they had more words to work with, and so 65 program could run on the 67, and David then expanded his table to make it a hex table. So we had the electronic code, if you wish, for all of the instructions. Well, when the 41 came along, boy, we are a very experienced pro. So when we did our first issue of the 41, we had an incredible amount of technical information right there. So when we opened the gate, and man, we were running.
Didn't HP say something like, after all non-normalized numbers of the 65, they sort of plug that, close the door on that.
Well, I remember
They
going up,
said, let's see you guys figure out.
there was a
how to do
guy
this."
by the, I can't remember his name, but he had one eye that did this, you know. He's a famous HP engineer. And when I was up there, and I remember going down the hall, and he came running up to me and he says, "How did you do whatever, something involving synthetic programming?" And I gave him a 1 or 2 word answer, technically. He said, "Oh." I mean, this is so surprising to them. They didn't know, I have any idea. Bill Wicks, of course, is our most famous member who was hired by HP. And because he was in a management position, he did, and he was very knowledgeable with the 41. He did synthetic programming and wrote a book. And he's famous for doing a program that made the goose fly backwards. Most of you are familiar.
He challenged,
Huh?
I think only
Yeah.
2 people managed to, he challenged everybody in EPC to make the goose fly backwards.
Yeah.
I think 2 people actually figured it out, or something like that.
Well, Wicks was a real ally at HP. Henry Horn was a real ally at HP, and there was a couple others. The PPC-ROM made synthetic programming easy for everybody because you know all the details were there. Programs for generating synthetic instructions were there, you know, and so forth. So synthetic programming.
Use bugs and pull out logic.
Yeah, and Wicks, there was a bug 2. Bug 2 was the initial way of using a bug in the machine to create non-normalized numbers, and Wicks corrected a lot of bugs, but somehow bug 2 always remained. And of course, once the PPC-ROM came out, well, bug 2 wasn't so important. And that's, he predicted that as, for me, I was particularly interested in synthetic tones because synthetic tones didn't give you any new tones, but they gave you different durations of the normal 9 tones that's in the 41.
There were 10 tones, and then the A through F gave you 6 more tones, and then each one had 8 different lengths, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, and so you could, if you wanted to send Morse code at a certain words per minute, you work it back to how long a bit, you know, a dit and a da is. A da is 3 times a dit, and you could then type in, you know, my name is Richard, and the 41 would say that in Morse code. The HP 41 wand.
Oh, yeah, that was.
I mentioned earlier about the barcode, and HP sent me a wand when they sent me the barcode. And Jake, what was it that you were also participating in the testing? What was that sheet? Was it 1 page that you said, hey, this is all screwed up?
They sent, yeah, I was reviewing the Rev F ROM version, and they sent the paper keyboard.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense to me because all it did was list all the 41 functions in alphabetical order. So it was not super easy to find things. And I thought, well, if it was arranged in the order of the keyboard that we're used to, it might be better. So I actually cooked up one by hand, and I was working with Dave Conklin. I sent it to him, and they liked it,
Yeah.
adopted it.
So that's one way that we, what's the title of this? What we started, okay. They sent me part of the barcode testing as well, a wand, and I noticed that, and I was very interested in barcode of the wand, as I mentioned, because of the low cost. We could print programs now in the newsletter nicely.
You could even draw things with a felt tip pen and get
Is
synthetic
that the
instructions.
zebra behind the bars? Your
Oh, yeah,
sister,
that
your
was-
sister made the
Yeah,
cartoon?
about scanning a zebra, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
And what I noticed,
PPC journals.
that if I took the wand and I held it very close to the tip, it would misread.
I think I vaguely remember.
And I suspected why it would misread, and so I did additional electrical tests. I took since the 41 and the wand was battery powered, I took a stool out in the middle of the field, and I scanned it out there, and it never misread. So I concluded that the environment in any normal room is so AC field contaminated that I was coupling the signal. If you held it back here, no problem, but you held it down here, there's a problem. Well, wait a minute, how I hold the wand is what kind of a design is that? So I wrote my report and sent it to HP, and very quickly I got a new wand. The new wand wasn't black, it was gray. And I made all my tests, passed the flying colors. I didn't realize what was going on until much later, but HP didn't change a thing. All they changed was my interpretation of it. Since I had a wand that didn't fail, of course, wands are no problem, so I didn't report it.
They never marketed the,
Huh?
they never marketed the shielded wand? They didn't market the shielded wand?
No, not that. They made, handmade and engineered out that wand just for me.
Well, you still have that one. Who's got that wand now?
And I was looking for that wand while I was going with stuff from Adam, and I don't remember seeing it, but he probably has it, because I wasn't going to do with it, I kept it. Club members reviewed the wand and its use, we mentioned that. I discovered the thing and reported. Revision E, here's another issue. It's a wand issue, but it's also a phone bulletin issue. I think it was revision E. They must have sent me revision E. I don't know how I had revision E, because those A, B, C, how many wands do you need? I didn't have all the revision. Or maybe it was in the newsletter, some members were reporting some rather serious bugs in revision E. And I knew that revision F was coming, and I reported this, and I don't remember if it was in a phone bulletin or in a newsletter, but because I reported it, wand sales, it stopped. And I don't know if people read this, and it was primarily the real enthusiasts who were, chances are being club members, buy wands in the first place. Wand wasn't a common accessory at all. And I didn't know till much later that HP revision F, the E died, and they were waiting for F, and I don't know how many wands went unsold, but anyway.
It's too bad. It was one of my favorite attachments, because you could get things into the calculator in a way that you couldn't before.
Yes, oh yeah, it was,
draw barcodes,
but it wasn't
poker chips and
pocket
scan
change to buy one either. I don't remember what the price was.
125.
Huh?
125, I think.
Well, today, 125 wouldn't be serious, but back then,
No, there was.
So, HP printed their barcode as we've seen, and they take a whole page crossed. They sent me examples for evaluation, and I mentioned all this already. I decided that I'm not going to take 3 pages to print a 41 program when I can do it on 1 or 1.5 pages, because journal space was at a premium, So I changed the format, and actually it was much better reading, quicker, easier to read, but it required, maybe that was the issue, it required that that be printed on a good quality paper and sharp images. And I suggest that the best example to see that is the back of the PPC ROM manual, because we published 153 routines and their barcode. And that's one of the reasons why the PPC ROM manual, they command quite a bit of money on the internet. today, and the 41, you know. There's a whole other reasons because it's such a good, well-written book. Okay, so that covers that, and PPC published more HP 41 barcode programs than any other HP user, all others combined. PPC published well over 3.3 million barcode programs. Now, a lot of that is the PPC ROM manual, and I printed 20,000 copies of the PPC ROM manual. Best example starts on page 469, the PPC ROM manual, and then Jake, heck, we were talking about this recently, you know. We were in Chicago for a picnic, was it?
It was a Friday night for the
That's right.
1980 conference. We were in West Staples RV, parked in Jack's house
There you go.
driveway,
There is the detail.
Motorhome, yeah.
and we were testing barcodes that had been produced on the HP 85 on Ron Johnson's HP 85.
And we were disappointed because we couldn't read it off the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Calculator speed increasing. The 41 is a very popular machine. I think there's well over 1 million that have been made over 10 years. And it was possible to modify the 41 to speed it up. And to me, I don't use the 41. I can't, I just can't use it because it's just too damn slow. Anyway, we published articles on how to do this, and of course you change the capacitor value. They would run faster, but they wouldn't run 2x, you know. And some machines ran faster than others, and of course, many peripherals wouldn't work at high speed. So you also had to install a new capacitor. No, not difficult, not critical. You might want to get the smallest value that continued to work. All right, HP picked that value because over battery voltage and temperature and all that stuff, peripheral stuff, that it would be sure to work. So you put in the crystal and you had to have a switch. Adding a switch to control the speed was essential. We showed using the right switch and where to put it. Executing beep is a sure enough way to test if it's running at speed because it won't sound like you normally hear beep. Observations inclusion. The club is a unique collection of technical people, here you are, who use HP calculators as a focal point to gather and share technical experiences. That's how I view it. The club is an open, not-for-profit organization that was challenged as PPC by big company thinking, Emmett Ingram, and it struggled, reorganized, and continued on as CHU, and now the annual HHC conferences. This presentation is only a snapshot of what we all started.
What was the lawsuit that you helped HP with?
Oh, I'm at HP, I'm sorry, at EduShop, my phone rings. Hello, this is so-and-so, it's a New York law firm. And we represent Hewlett Packard, and we're being sued by Leitrim, correct me on the names here, Jake, because you have violated our patent, which they had, and the concept that that HP used that violated their claim. Their patents was, I guess, what you call soft menus. You know, you have the 5 or 6 screens and then the keys down below it and so forth. A soft menu. And we think that you have some information that related to this. I said yes, and we talked on the phone. And he said, well,
Are you saying HP sued Latrim?
No, Latrim was suing HP.
Oh, okay.
So
Because you know, he gave they gave a presentation at the 87, or, yeah, 87 conference.
Who
in
did,
Atlanta.
Latrim?
Latrim,
Latrim.
from New Orleans.
Yeah. Well, the whole Latrim concept to me was
It was lunacy.
nonsense, okay?
Right.
It didn't make any meaning.
Take over, Ron.
You want to take all these keys and reduce them down to a very
16.
few, huh?
Yeah, reduced it to 16.
16. All the key presses on the accordion were reduced down to 16. Anyway, so we discussed it, and as it turns out that number one, prior art was done by a PPC member. What's the guy's name? The guy who wrote the
The guy who wrote it? Dave
No,
Conklin. That was Dave Conklin's project.
no,
Oh,
who wrote and had the overlay.
Oh, John Roush.
Yes,
Order number 88.
there you go. Dick knows. That's why he's our official historian.
I've seen him on the HP Museum Forum in the past year.
So, I knew, apparently they couldn't find him or something. I knew the person who had done prior art, and I published that prior art. And I had the prior art in my hand. So I was a very important person for their defense. So they flew a guy out from New York, and he took me out to dinner. And I think I wrote a report for him. Okay? And one of the first, almost only time that I made money with my HP knowledge is I charged them a consultant fee. You know, not much, but it was a lot of money. But in terms of lawyer hour time, my 5 hours of consulting charges were minuscule.
20 minutes of the lawyer's time.
So what they decided to do is they were going to file, I don't know what it's called, but it's part of patent law or what have you, like a brief with the patent office. And the person who was going to file that was me. They did all the work, but it was going to be in my name. So I filed at the U.S. Patent Office and challenged, provided information that showed that the Latrim claims were worthless. I didn't hear from them. I got a folder that thick of all kinds of legal stuff. And I never heard what happened, but I assume HP won. You know. Any other questions? Yes.
All right, so thank you for this. This has been really interesting to me because I didn't know all this history. Why and how did you get started with this club?
Well, I can tell you two stories related to that. One, I was just a crazy enthusiast. Okay? Now with the HP 65, no, I'm sorry, my enthusiasm really started with a 35. Now with a 35, it's not programmable, but you could solve very complex equations and problems by writing a program essentially, and you have a loop, and so you could iterate and solve problems. And the challenge is that if you could take one keystroke out of the loop, that saves a lot. So it took very careful. You didn't care how many keystrokes to organize a stack to do what you wanted to do, but then when you did the loop, you just kept pressing these keys around and around, and you get your answer in 4 or 5 iterations. And you write these down on 3x5 cards. Well, it turns out this is something that a lot of 35 owners did. In fact, there was a guy who was, I think he lived in Arizona, I can't remember his name again. He later became a club member, and that's how I knew this. He went to HP and presented all this stuff. And they said, oh my, that's great. And they bought his manuscript. I think they paid him $600. And that became, I think it was the HP 35 math pack. Okay? And a couple of years went by and along comes the 45. And they did an HP 40, but it was essentially just the same thing. And he said, he went back to HP, and of course this was a couple of years later. And the people he may have dealt with probably weren't even in that position or available. And he said, you know, of course he was a little naive. When you sign off, here's my book, part of the contract was, and you shall do this, this, and this with it. You give it to them, they do with it as they like. But HP being HP, well, they said, well, how do we know what you're telling us is true? How do I know that this is your stuff? He said, well, strangely enough, all the numbers I use for the problem examples are my phone number, my street address, and so on. Well, I guess I have to accept. HP graciously paid him another $600 with a more clarified contract. So that experience with programming, when the 65 came along, now we don't have to write down these programs on cards anymore. We could just put it in the machine. And it was so exciting and so much fun that, of course, anybody else is doing the same thing. Oh, we're best buds right away, right? And so I decided to take some of that little things I learned and put it in my first newsletter. One sheet of paper. It's available. It's on your drive. And I went to remember 35s and 65s were sold by HP salesmen. That was long before HP decided to go into the real world, you know. And that was sold by mail order, to sell by mail order. An HP salesman, which was making umpty-ump dollars per hour to sell this $395 calculator. So I went to him and he said, well, I can't give you the names and addresses of people I've sold to. I said, well, could you give those people my name and address? Well, I can do that. And he did, and that's how it grew.
Oh,
and of course, the more people are receiving and reading, the more input you get. And that's how the club started. June 1974.
When you changed, when the name changed to PPC, was it you that picked the name PPC?
Pretty much so. I mean, I think there's a lot of suggestions and what have you, but that made sense. But it was very carefully specified that PPC doesn't mean anything.
That's always what's vexed me, is like, how did you come upon it and it didn't mean anything?
I thought it was personal.
They were arguing.
Personal Programmers Club, people programming calculators, you know, you can come up with a whole range. Yeah.
I think he has a comment on that.
Before it was PPC, one of the articles in the journal by Craig Pierce was all about programmable pocket calculators, and throughout his article he kept calling them PPCs.
Oh.
I think that stuck that name in everybody's head. And
Quite.
it's adopted.
Yeah, well, Craig Pierce contributed quite a number of ideas and things. He's from Chicago.
He's
still
founder
around.
of the chip pack.
He is?
He has, you know, he's still alive. He hasn't
Oh, he's still alive. Well, that's the important thing here
years,
today.
Yeah.
I went over to his house one time.
Yeah, I was with you.
Oh, okay.
We played pinball.
Pinball wizard.
Yeah. And we also saw the laser discs. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was an incredible thing. You know, and he had one. Wasn't he into photography also? I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Another question.
No,
Oh, that's
just another nostalgia item that we were discussing by email on the mailing list or amongst ourselves was the Toaster Users Club. And the thing that came up with Wes Staples And,
Oh, yeah, the joke was,
and, you know, that was in Chew Chronicle. I think Roger was the one that found the reference to it.
yeah.
No, I didn't. it wasn't
People
me,
say,
somebody else.
calculator users club? That's about as useful as a toaster users club. But of course, it turned out to be significant.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, according to my clock,
That's my.
10:07.
we're 7 minutes over schedule. Who did that?